Our next event, we've got an interview with the excellent and esteemed Mike Cave, our owner of Loft Studios and mix engineer, master engineer to all kinds of stuff. I mean, the headlines, obviously, Lewis Capaldi, multi-platinum work, KRS-One, the Charlatans. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Steady. Thank you for joining us. Can you give everyone a super quick sort of potted history of where you came from in terms of what you do at university, where that led you, and maybe touch on some of the other studios that you worked on before getting to own the Loft?
Okay, so I guess I was one of the sort of last people to come through like the traditional route of production. So that involves sort of working in a commercial studio as a T-boy and then tape op and just gradually working you through the ranks that way. And then I spent about best part of 10 years at Par Street Studios in Liverpool, which at the time was a big facility. They had two big rooms in there and lots of other studios, so we could do orchestras, we could do big mix sessions. We had SSL and Neve large format consoles, so it was a good facility. Probably, in fact, it was the biggest outside London. So we used to get some pretty big artists through there as well. Um, and so yeah, I started there just making lots of tea for people and watching and learning, and then just gradually worked through that. And then I've been freelance now for over 10 years, nearly 15 years, and I wear two hats now, really. So I'm primarily a mix engineer, and I run Loft Mastering, which is a mastering facility. So between the two, I'm sort of become more of like a finisher of records nowadays.
Is that is that the main source of work at the moment?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I do now. So I don't really produce anymore. It's literally just mixing and mastering. And I'm also doing quite a lot of mentoring as well, and which is something that I'm trying to push a little bit more. I can probably go into a bit more detail on that at some point, but I think it's pretty important to make sure that the sort of next generation of people coming into the industry get to experience at least some of what I did. So I think it'd be wrong for me to not share that.
No, it's a great point. And you mentioned your route from going to T-boy to,
Mm.
that the old traditional route, which obviously a lot of us here are going to be educators as well. What you're saying about mentoring is really interesting. Do you think would be useful to replace that traditional route?
I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? It can't really be replaced because I don't think there's anything better than watching a producer make a record with a band and like or with an artist. It's like all the things. I learned a lot about how not to do things as well. It wasn't all plain sailing, but the problem we've got now is that people are trying to get into the music industry as engineers and producers, and they're not getting those opportunities to watch how to make records. So it's basically like the Wild West. People are just trying to glean what they can from YouTube tutorials and courses here and there. But if we're not careful, I think that it's going to become a bit of a dying art. Really, I think it already has to an extent. So anyone that's in the same situation as me, I think has sort of almost got like a responsibility to try and share as much of that skill set and experience as possible.
In fact, I meant to ask you, are there any particular tunes, and I was putting you on the spot here, sorry. Are there any particular tunes that you got most from as when you were learning, when you were coming up? Were any particular tunes and any particular elements of those tunes that you thought, wow, that's fantastic, that's a real game changer of production? I'm just thinking might be interesting to chuck some audio on.
Are you talking about production that I've been involved with?
Either anything you've shadowed, watched, or as T-boy, or anything you've been involved with, and
Um,
anything that you've found
I
to
mean,
be.
yeah. Rather than being specific about a track, I think it's worth a mention about Ken Nelson, who was my mentor. So Ken Nelson's a incredible producer and engineer who was working at Par Street as well. He was there before me, and I sort of learned alongside him. Um, and um, I think he did all the Coldplay records, and he ended up doing some incredibly big records. And then unfortunately, we lost him out of Par Street then because he was off doing those things. But at the time, I think, I could sit with him for 20 minutes and there'd be like a couple of light bulb moments that I just wouldn't have got otherwise. So, everything from arrangements and, creating shape in songs. Because a lot of the time when you listen to people's demos, I see the same issues all the time. So often like a lack of shape in terms of the journey of the song. So things can be like quite linear, and also lack of depth. So, panning is easy. We can put something on the left or the right, but we can't just get a button and go, oh, can I put that at the back? And can I put this at the front? So the sort of tricks we use to try and create that dimension, that sort of third dimension of depth. I learned a lot about that as well in terms of like early reflections and different effects to create that illusion. So yeah, there was a lot to learn, but I think rather than mentioning songs, I think it's people, and Ken for me was that person. He's really, really helpful.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So then moving into the Loft, what were the first sort of major recordings and the first more interesting stuff that you've done that you can relate to were probably most important to you?
So the Loft it came out of basically when I left Par Street. I was in house at Par Street, but I also had a studio in Par Street as well for doing lots of programming and Pro Tools editing, stuff like that. So when I left Par Street, I needed another space to just be able to do those things like overdubs, editing. And that's really what it was supposed to be initially. But I think as things have evolved and equipment has become more powerful and better quality and smaller, the place is just built into like a self-sufficient space really where we can do everything here. Um, so yeah, it just evolved. And I think probably the pivotal artist for me in terms of like that transition was the Charlatans. So they came into Par Street and we did a record with them there. And my policy as a tape op or an assistant was always to try and make sure that every person I worked with asked for me specifically when they next came in. So that's basically what happened with the Charlatans, but they wanted to do the next record at their studio. So, the way that it was structured, there's no way I could have left Par Street for 2 months and then just got my job back. So it almost like forced me to leave and become freelance. So, and they were really supportive, to be honest. And their manager, Steve Harrison, was great, and he had a few other bands that he kept me busy with. So that transition was made like really smooth by the Charlatans and their team around it, really.
That's good. Yeah, thank you, Joe. Just putting up some pictures for those. So the entrepreneurial side of things, would you say that's as important, more important? How would you balance that with the other skills, the other hard skills of being a mix and mastering engineer?
Do you know what I've always said? Like 90% of it is people skills, because we had at Par Street we had some incredible engineers coming through the doors, but if it was someone that couldn't really get on with anyone, or was just grumpy or awkward, or no one wanted to work with them. So I think I learned that quite quickly, is that if you can get the people skills right, then you can learn the rest on the job. Do you know what I mean? So it was all about trying to make people comfortable, and this is another thing Ken showed me about, like, it's not really about the technical until you've got a great song and a great performance. So we could be the most technical, incredible mixers. If the song's not there and the performances on that song are not right, then the mix isn't going to be right. So I think, Ken told me a lot about like how to make people comfortable to get the best out of them and get the best performances. And then the rest is easy, really. I say easier, because I think we've all been in that situation where we've been sent something to mix, and it doesn't matter what we do to it, we just cannot get it to sound like a record. And I think intrinsically, it's not what we're doing; it's what we've been given. So yeah, I think it's just keep that in mind with everything, and also keep that in mind with what you say yes and yes to, basically. I mean, nowadays I won't agree to mix anything until I've heard the full multi-track, the raw multi-track, um, and work out what, and also have conversations about reference points and the vision that the client has for the record, and make sure that it's in line with what is actually possible. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what I do to it. No one's going to be happy, and I'm not going to want to put my name to it. So, yeah, I approach everything with caution really nowadays, and make sure that I can actually deliver something great.
No, that's great. Are there any particular examples? I'm going to press you because it'd be cool to have some audio underneath us of a song that you've done that tells that sort of.
Oh,
As
I
you
tell
say.
you. Okay, so in terms of performance and song, Lewis Capaldi, "Lost on You," and only because it's so bare, and I think that it's a good example of like why there's a misconception, I think, with simple acoustic tracks, that they're easy to mix. I often get this thing from labels where they say, "Oh, we're doing a full album. We've only got these two. It's a piano and vocal. We can you do us a deal on that because it'll take you 5 minutes." But I find those records harder to mix than big pop records because there's nowhere to hide. So you've got, if the performance and the emotion in the performance isn't there, it's not going to draw you in if there's just a piano and a vocal. So I think that Lewis track is a good one because it's so raw. There's like a vocal, a piano, and actually no effects or anything. So it's totally reliant on his performance.
For YouTube copyright purposes, we've muted the audio here, but the song to go and find is "Lost on You" by Lewis Capaldi. Listen out for the particularly dry vocal.
Thank you, Joe. That's great. Mike, you've mentioned the Wild West of the music industry. It'd be brilliant to get you to expand a little bit more on. This is in conversations that we've had about this. It'd be great to hear what your thoughts are about that and what specifically you meant and solutions to
that. So, I mean, in many areas of the music industry, it's the Wild West because the control is now open to, an artist can go from zero to release without any help if they don't want it. But I think what I meant, I think when we've had conversations about this is that in terms of the quality control and the actual skill set of people recording, is no one's showing people how to do things. They're just winging it. And you can hear it in the recordings, and you can hear it in the arrangements of the songs. And it makes it makes a mixer's job a lot more challenging, really. We've got, some of the bigger sort of pop mixers can take, a couple of days to put together, but day one is literally just fixing issues and trying to make some sense of the sonics. At the same time, we've got one of the biggest issues, I think, is that, digital audio is intrinsically unforgiving, so it's like whatever you put into it, you get the same out. And with a lot of these sort of cheaper Chinese condenser microphones and a lot of the plugins that a lot of plugin manufacturers want to like hype their sound so that everyone thinks it's impressive. So everything's getting brighter and louder and harsher. So there's a lot of surgery to do at the mix stage to try and sort of fix all these issues. And we just didn't used to get that when we were working on tape. Everything was a lot simpler. Most recording studios had, nice German mics and ribbon mics and things like that. And everything seemed just a lot simpler to mix. And the bar's higher now. If you listen to, the heavyweight mixers now pushing out, incredible mixes that we've got to compete with, and it takes time. It takes time and effort and to keep up. I think years ago, if we listened to like mixes from the 90s, they're good and they make sense, but they're just not on the same level as what we can achieve now. So yeah, as I say, there's still great engineers out there, but there's just fewer of them, and there's a lot of people just trying to make it work, producers and artists in their bedrooms, capturing things on cheap equipment, and it just makes for more work for us, really.
So last question from me before I open up the floor to anyone else. What are your favorite or most useful techniques for dealing with these issues? What are the kind of corrective techniques that you were talking about?
I mean, thankfully, you know, the technology is sort of causing some of the issues, but there's technology there to resolve the same issues. So thank God we have got solutions to these problems. But you know, and all these sort of plugins like Soothe and Spiff, the company called Oak Sound who make these plugins, they're designed specifically for these issues that I'm talking about, to resolve harshness and anything that's too brittle that before we just wouldn't have been able to do. So those type of plugins really are a savior. Without them, we would definitely be struggling. Yeah.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Well, we've come to the Q&A section. I know that there's one from Joe. So if I'll open up, Joe, do you want to ask a question to Mike, and who else can think about that? We've got 4 or so minutes before we jump in.
Yeah, being a musicologist, I can't hear a mix without wanting to know how it was built. On the Lewis Capaldi track that you played there, an incredibly dry mix and sounded very close mic'd. That kind of creative decision on how to build the sound world, does that come from you, the artist, a conversation? How does that work?
It actually came from Lewis's team. So Lewis is very much about, he just wants to perform. So whether that's at a gig or, you know, do a vocal take in the studio, beyond that, he doesn't seem as he sort of hands over the responsibility of the details to his management and his label. So Lewis is happy as long as his performance is there. He's happy. But yeah, it was one of those situations where mix 1 had some reverb on it. Then they were like, "Can we have less reverb?" Mix 2's less. Mix 3, can we have a bit less? And then it's like, let's just get rid of the reverb and just see how that works. So, and you know, it's a bold move because it's such a common thing we do, isn't it? We get a vocal up and we put some reverb on it, you know. So I just find that it doesn't work very well unless the vocal performance is really engaging. And I think in that case he could carry it, you know. It was like he's singing in your ear. That was the idea, really. But not all vocal performances can handle that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really handy. I mean, it's a super geeky question. Do you remember what the mic it was?
I didn't record the vocal.
Oh, of course not. You were mixing it.
I mixed the record, yeah. So I'm trying to think if anyone ever told me what it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's got issues, that vocal recording. It breaks up. Because he can belt out when he wants to, and there is moments in that song where the mic actually breaks up. So, but again, you know, the performance carries it, and this is why I always say, like, some of my favorite records are not perfect sonically. Like, you know, they've got issues with them. There's tuning issues. But the performance is so emotive. That's what music should be about, isn't it? It's like how it makes you feel, and I'd much rather have something that's breaking up that's special than something that's sonically perfect and just lacks vibe. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions? I've got one in that back pocket. Oh yeah, Lachlan, please.
I've got a question. So, Mike, you were talking about how you've got this kind of stringent vetting process where you kind of like to hear the multi-track beforehand.
Yeah.
But then you're also talking about how you might be spending 3 days on a pop track. Does that mean that some tracks you might even hear the multi-track and know there's going to be a bit of work? You can hear the Chinese microphones cranking away, but the songs just win you over and you're like, okay, I'm prepared to do the work on this one?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think because people's rough mixes can be a little bit misleading. Sometimes you think, oh, actually, you know, this is in good shape. And then you get the multi-track and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, there's a lot of work here. So, I mean, I don't tend to have like a fixed mix rate. So everything's bespoke. So it's all about like, okay, let's hear what you've got. Let's speak about where you want to get to. And then I can then work out, okay, what work is involved to get you from where you are to deliver something really special. And then that will then allow me to go, okay, well, you know what? It might be a quick mix, or it might be something that's like needs a bit of additional production. And then we can talk about, do you want me to do that, or do you want to take it away and do some more? Or so I just find that it's a better way of working, and then there's no surprises later for the label, or if the artist is independent. I don't really want to go back to them and go, you know what, I need a bigger fee because there's more work involved than I thought. So I just like to know what I'm getting involved with before I start, really.
Sounds very wise. So
That's
sorry, I'll shut up in a minute, but like, yeah, I do find it very interesting how the artist, or the tracking session will come back with such an excellent mix, and they've spent ages trying to mix it, and then they give it to you. They know it's not quite there, but you're kind of adding, I guess, in the overall project, you're kind of adding less because they've got it 85% there, and they just want you to do that last little bit.
Yeah. I mean, what can also be really challenging is, that term demoitis, when people have been listening to a rough mix for so long, they get an attachment to it. So I think that's the sort of period we're in now. I've never known demoitis to be as much of an issue as it is now. People are so attached to things, and actually it can stop us making great records because people sometimes won't allow you to, even just in terms of translation, just to allow you to create a mix that works on lots of different systems, which is what our job is, really. But I'm finding some artists, particularly artists that are unmanaged and independent, so they've got no guidance and they're just tied to a certain thing, but they're giving you references of something that I know how to get to, but they're not allowing me to get there. So that's another reason why I say about the Wild West. It's like people are not being guided in the right way,
Thank you, Mike. That's brilliant. I mean, another super quiet round of applause. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
We'll have retroactively one for Pascal as well. Thank you very much.